Assalamualaikum. Did you know that before the 1967 war, US paid little attention to Israel because it did not want to jeopardize its relationship with Arab countries? The American Jewish elite distanced itself from Israel because they did not want their loyalty to the US questioned. American Jews made a point of towing US official foreign policy because it facilitated assimilation and access to power. That changed after Israel won the 1967 war and US started to see it as a strategic asset in the Middle East. Once again, the Jewish elite toed the line and supported US foreign policy. And Israel at peace with its neighbors would be worthless. Only an Israel beholden to the US would be useful because then the US Jewish leaders could act as the spokesman for American imperial ambition. After the war, American Jews exploited the Nazi Holocaust as the perfect weapon for deflecting criticism of Israel. For the American Jewish elite, the Holocaust performed the same function as Israel. It is another chip in a high-stake power game. After World War II, the Nazi Holocaust was not cast as a uniquely Jewish event, nor was it a historically unique event. It was only after the 1967 war that the Nazi Holocaust became unique and without parallel in history. The Jews were not the Nazis' only victims. The communists were the first political victims. The handicapped were the first genocide victims. The Nazis systematically murdered about 500,000 gypsies, which is a proportional loss to the Jewish genocide, but some Holocaust writers insisted that the gypsies did not fall victim to the same genocidal onslaught as Jews. This denial of other Nazi victims is meant to preserve an exclusive Jewish franchise over the Holocaust. The number of Holocaust survivors at war's end was about 100,000. Because enduring the camps became a crown of honor, many Jews who spent the war elsewhere represented themselves as camp survivors. A strong motive behind this misrepresentation was monetary. The post-war German government provided compensation to Jews who had been in ghettos or camps. Many Jews fabricated their stories to meet this eligibility. Much later, Holocaust survivors was redefined to include those who evaded the Nazis. For example, 1,000 Polish Jews who found refuge in the Soviet Union after the Nazi invaded Poland were also designated Holocaust survivor. In 1952, Germany signed 3 agreements to compensate Jewish victims. The German government negotiated financial settlement with the Conference on Jewish Material Claims against Germany and allocated $10 million annually for 12 years for Jewish victims who fell through the cracks in the compensation process. The Claims Conference initially said that the money would be used for Jews persecuted by the Nazi. Later on, it annulled the agreement and used the money for the rehabilitation of Jewish communities instead of Jewish victims. What benefits the actual victims received were indirect and incidental. The Claims Conference even tried to appropriate for itself denationalized Jewish properties in the former East Germany worth hundreds of millions of dollars that rightfully belong to living Jewish heirs. That's not the only incident of the organized American Jewry robbing its own people. The author says, when Jewish elite rob Jewish survivors, no ethical issues arise. It's just about money. In 1955, an Israeli journalist cited a document, misread, it turned out, that Swiss banks still held Holocaust-era Jewish accounts with billions of dollars. WJC leapt at the opportunity to flex its muscle. Switzerland was easy prey. Few would sympathize with rich Swiss bankers against needy Holocaust survivors. More importantly, Swiss banks were very vulnerable to economic pressure from the US. The Holocaust industry orchestrated a shameless vilification campaign against the Swiss. In 1996, the Swiss banks agreed to establish an investigative committee and abide by its finding. The Holocaust industry continued to mount pressure for a final settlement. The Swiss pleaded that a settlement should await the Commission's finding. After all, it was WJC that originally called for an investigation. The truth is, the Holocaust industry stood to lose from the findings, even if only a few claimants ultimately proved legit. The claim against the Swiss banks would lose credibility. If the legit claimants were identified, the Swiss banks would be obliged to compensate only them, not the Jewish organizations. The Holocaust industry forced Switzerland to settle because time was of essence. Needy Holocaust survivors were dying every day. After the Swiss agreed to a settlement, the agency miraculously passed. More than a year later, there was still no distribution plan. As of December 1999, less than half of the $200 million had been distributed to actual victims. After the lawyers' fees were paid, the Swiss money flowed into the coffers of worthy Jewish organizations. Only the lowest of the low would take advantage of its own people for profit. That was what the Holocaust industry did, took advantage of Holocaust survivors. If the reparation monies were paid to the actual survivors, the amount was pitiful compared to the amount paid to lawyers and the Jewish organizations who claimed to fight for the survivors. The Holocaust industry may yet turn out to be the greatest robbery in history, says the author. I highly recommend this book. You can get it using the links in the description. If you like listening to me babbling about books, please subscribe and turn on notification. Thank you.